I'm Chris McDonough, a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. Welcome everybody to the interview room. Got a special program for you. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things. One, Dana Smithers and why I don't think Bryan in any way is going to be connected to that case, but this is just my opinion. Within the last hour, the authorities have put out what I was thinking, and what I'm going to show you here tonight is this idea that it's floating around social media that he's involved. And you can see that there's a press release just 2 hours ago that said the Stroud Area Regional Police Department is aware of the many current reports, news articles in which various media outlets have reported connections between the SARPD's Dana Smithers missing person investigation and Idaho murderer suspect Bryan Kohberger. The SARPD has no evidence that Dana Smithers disappeared in any way, that Dana Smithers' disappearance in any way is tied to the Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger. With that said, that's how the authorities are looking right now in relationship to connecting him. What they didn't say, okay, is why there was probably an investigative probe to the grand jury. And if you haven't had a chance, get over to Nancy Grace's shows today. We talked about it at length. Personally, I follow the facts, I follow the evidence, and then I apply that with the experience that I've had working and solving these kind of cases. In this particular situation, this is a very sad scenario because social media kicked off this view into Bryan. Now, don't misunderstand me. I would love to find a lot of problems that he was involved in. I think it would be really important to find those problems. However, there's also another family attached to Dana. And it's, in my opinion, we have to tread very carefully in relationship to that case. And so the first thing that struck me on this particular case, and I know it's been floating around, a couple of days. I'm that guy that sits back and, watches the flood dams open. And once they realize, oops, that was wrong, then we weigh the evidence. And this is maybe an example of it. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. So on this date, May 28th, when Dana goes missing, what I'm going to approach here today for the family is to give them some thought process in relationship to my observations and help them maybe stay focused on a possible other individuals involved in this particular horrific event. So she goes missing May 28th. We know that she's seen on video, a Ring doorbell video, leaving her friend's house with her cell phone in hand. However, we also know that at some point that cell phone makes it back to her house, and that eventually her body is then found less than 200 yards away, over a railing down by a freeway entrance. And when I show you some of the video here that the authorities had released early on, I think you're going to maybe be thinking a little bit deeper about this particular incident and why it would be it would be a long shot that BK is involved. However, you always leave your options open, but the authorities have clearly come out and said, based on what I just showed you, there is no connection at this point. Now, it doesn't mean they're probing, evident of the fact that they could be doing this investigative grand jury with the parents asking. However, what I find always interesting is when it's reported in the world, into the world, that there's a caveat that he had an alibi, and that a source within the investigation had provided that information. So that said, let's take a quick look at what we know. And so Dana goes missing on the 28th. She is not reported until June 4th. She's a mother of three with a younger daughter at home. And she apparently left her with a sister, went on Facebook, created a Facebook page. There's a tremendous amount of information about the case, but you can see her here, and you can clearly see her cell phone in her left hand. Now, what's obvious to anyone is the authorities on the missing persons flyer report that her cell phone is discovered at the home. So they have the information in relationship to the cell phone as a whole, you can bet. Okay. All right. So the next thing, you see her leaving, and then her body is discovered almost a year later at this location. And what's interesting about this particular location, and we're going to get into it and why I almost immediately thought, I'm not buying this BK thing here yet. Always keeping an open mind, but this is also contributed to the Pocono record for reference. You can go back and see their news video from their news feed. They are the recorders of this particular news feed. But here you have the authorities coming out of the woods, carrying a couple of Home Depot buckets. The tarp there, you can see typically on a body dump of this situation, you utilize the tarp sometimes not necessarily to cover the victim, but to sift with dirt and items were around where the victim was discovered. And because it's been reported she was discovered with heavy decomposition, that she had to be identified through dental records, this opens up a lot of ideas in relationship to the type of clothing that may or may not have been found, meaning, were her clothes on her? Were they beside her? Were they moved as a result of animal activity? Was her mandible, connected, her jaw? And then, so all of these are questions that we don't know, and we probably shouldn't know while the investigation is ongoing. However, if you take a look at what we're seeing the investigators come out of the woods with, he is talking to the gal on the phone who's probably the supervisor and or case agent, and he points it out to her, hey, this is what we got in the bucket. And she says, okay, we'll put it down there. And if you look closely in the bucket, I know it's going to be interpreted 1,000 ways. You know, is this her clothing? Is this that? The way I always operate is I don't know. I don't know what's in that bucket. I know it was important enough for them to take it, place the bucket on the ground, and for him to point it out to that detective who's just pointing right there. We'll put it down there on the ground. You can see there's something in it, but we don't know what that is. And we can speculate all day, but we don't know. Okay. So he puts the bucket down, and now they're going back in because they're wrapping up, as we used to call it, button up the scene, and everybody's leaving. They're coming out of the woods with more items that they brought in. That little tin can there is typically utilized, obviously, for any bone fragments or anything to that effect. And or if she's already been removed from the scene when the ME got there or the coroner got there, 90% of the, if not 99% of the time, you want to make sure that they see any bone fragments and put it into the bag so that everything goes with them. So sometimes if animals had moved, bones or something to that effect, if there was some activity there and the investigator crime scene unit came in and found it, they would typically recover that and then take it over to the medical examiner's office and drop it off for the proper chain of custody. That large box, I would think, is probably a metal detector. And I don't know if this was spliced together from the news agency that showed him coming back up there, or if that was the first time and that was a second time that we just saw there. But either way, he came back up with those buckets. You can see what appears to be digging tools and items utilized. Now, these are the kind of cases that, number one, right off of the bat, where the victim was found was exactly less than a mile. I think it was about 200 yards from her residence. And this is that line showing that location of where her body was located and where her house was. So it's not far. So if we go to where the body was located, this is what is in front of the area where that body is found. There's a 3-story hotel. And as you can see, this would be something that would have, quite frankly, a potential for a tremendous amount of transient traffic. Okay. But as we start to scan around, past this hotel, and we look to where the body was, that is the area where the body was located. Now, one of the things I want to show you, I'm going to go back here for a second, is you see this building off to the right? Okay. That is the area, the bank that we see, bank here off to the right. Okay. So she's in and around this area in the back there. Okay. Now, why is this significant? Well, number one, we have to think that if she is down here, there's got to be a couple of reasons why a suspect would choose this, meaning this geographic location. One, is it a place of familiarity? Two, is this just a situation that all of a sudden presents itself? She's a victim of opportunity and is pulled into these woods. Or three, is this a place that the suspect feels very comfortable with and is familiar with the location? So those are some considerations. And what we do is, again, we go back to the victim risk continuum: environment, situation, circumstance, low, medium, or high. Okay. So you guys tell me, if her phone is at her house and there hasn't been an explanation as to why that is, yet her body is here, does she leave her house at some point to go to the store, to meet somebody? Did she get pulled out of her house and asked to meet somewhere? Those are the kind of things that we want to critically think through, those types of minutia details, which I'm sure the authorities are doing. Okay. So the suspect is lowering their risk level of exposure by choosing this particular geographic region here. Okay. However, if the victim is out walking and that suspect just happens to be driving, now we have to look at the mentality of the opportunity. If, typically these guys, if they see a victim of opportunity, there's a higher probability, if it's a high risk situation, i.e., the time of evening, the type of path that the victim was taking, and the suspect says, okay, I can take advantage of this, and immediately parks and or positions into a location where they have the advantage. Now, one of the things I think is getting overlooked here is the suspect has moved her into that area. Either he confronts her and moves her into that area, or if the act occurred, i.e. the death occurred in a different location, and he dumps her there, now he has to move her. Okay. So her body weight becomes significant in relationship to why it's difficult to do that. And what I mean by that is for the suspect. Because once a human being stops breathing and they're gone, now you have a really challenging situation. And a lot of suspects don't think through this. They're so caught up in their fantasies that they're not thinking through, okay, what's the next step here? What do I got to do once she's dead? Well, obviously, if there's a situation they have to move them, well, that means you got to move this person into those woods. And that's a problem. So my thinking is there's probably a situation where he takes her into those woods. Now we have a gas station down the street, and this is an interesting picture. And by the way, don't start a bunch of rumors on social media because you see a white car there. Okay? Don't do that. I don't think it's Kohberger's car in any way, shape, or form. But this is a overview of the bank parking lot right next to where her body is found. Okay? You can see that driveway. There it is. And in the car in the background, it looks like a Toyota. Okay? And it is not, please don't start a bunch of rumors with a white car in the background that it's Bryan, Kohberger. Okay? This is just a Google map screenshot. But you see a path there to the left. And so we know that a suspect could park in this bank parking lot if the individual had picked her up. And now that path and this area becomes significant because now the suspect's lowering his risk because it's a comfortable risk for the suspect. So in theory, they could have walked down this path into the dump site and or the area where he harmed her. So we don't know, the authorities have not released if she was actually murdered and or died at this spot in terms of that's where it occurred. We know that her body is here, but we don't have information about what's around that crime scene. And maybe that's what has compelled the authorities to release today the information about BK is not involved in this incident. They obviously potentially have other information, and what maybe the grand jury probe is all about is to eliminate any possibilities. Now, does that put other people into the circle? Potentially. Maybe one of the ID cards or something to that effect is in play here. We don't know. But what we do know is what they're saying. So what they're looking for is where did the suspect and the victim cross? And this is what we call, again, contact sites. And going back to the Idaho 4, we talked very heavily about we don't know where they crossed yet. We do know his surveillance in relationship to those victims, Bryan's. But in this situation, if we look at the profile of the geographic footprint here, we can clearly see it's much different than him spending all of his time and effort in surveilling those types of things. So one of the things I want to consider here in discussion, and you guys tell me what you think, is we have to go back to his thought process just after graduation. Okay. So he graduates in May. We know in April he bought that knife, according to sources, Dateline specifically, that he buys it on Amazon. So he's got that knife. Now, I would submit to you that there's a whole bunch of thought process going on. And Greg Cooper, Dr. Picotto, Dr. Ann Burgess, Dean, myself, and many others are of the opinion that there is a buildup taking place here. Okay. And that he is, maximizing that buildup in relationship to setting in this thought process of selecting the knife, choosing the victims, understanding the geographic region, going to that geographic region. And if you think about this and we overlay it into the thought process of somebody who, just got their deer license as a hypothetical, what do? They go out long before the hunt. They buy, all the gear. Some of them go out to the geographic region they're going to hunt, and they discover what the weaknesses are of the terrain and how they can best take advantage of those weaknesses. How, are they going to use a tree stand? Are they going to go solo and just lay behind a rock and, go that route? But there's almost a physiological change that takes place. And by the way, hunters, hunt for food. They're not hunting to kill. I'm talking just to kill. I'm talking about the type of mentality that, builds up into a serial type of offender, that they build into that mentality. And so with Kohberger, if we think about it, if we go back to the affidavit for an example, okay, we go back to page 11 in the affidavit. Let me pull that up for you here. All right, so what's the first thing that the authorities learned on page 11 in the affidavit? Based on information provided on the WSU website, Kohberger is currently a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University. Pursuant to records provided by a member of the interview panel for Pullman Police Department. So they get this from a member of the panel where Kohberger was trying to come in and, get that job about technology. And the affiant says, we learned that Kohberger's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. These records also showed Kohberger wrote an essay when he applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. Kohberger wrote in his essay, he had interest in assisting rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technology data in public safety operations. And then it goes into, of course, the Reddit survey that's cited in here. But I think it's important to recognize what his mindset is in relationship to how he's planning this particular crime. And in his pre-planning, he is projecting in his public persona this helper idea, that he's the guy that's going to help law enforcement understand the technology aspect of how criminals cover their tracks. So if we think a little bit deeper about that, and we go back and we look at how this guy operated, okay, here's what we've learned. The criminology program there, the basics of criminology theory and practice while concentrating your study of fields in digital forensics. The degree can help you gain the knowledge and skills you need to investigate crimes with digital technology, including computers and portable devices. Learn how computers and electronic devices can be used to facilitate the commission of a crime. Let me repeat what it states on the website, the SAIL website, by the way. It's hands-on learning when using the same evidence and scenarios encountered in the real-world investigations. So he's flooded with not only criminology, he's flooded with psychology, and then he's flooded with this digital expertise he believes. So much so that his confidence base is to present itself to a panel of experts in a law enforcement setting, trying to slide in under the public persona to cover the secret life. So imagine being on that panel and reading this, and then later finding out that he was your guy. Okay? Imagine being the professor who taught him about, criminology. And then imagine thinking through that now in retrospect, looking back and start looking for all of those red flags. Okay? So that, in my head, I thought to myself, not being my first rodeo, to quote. Does that fit the woods where this Dana is found? I'm not buying it yet. It's still soggy bread for me. Those of you who have been on my channel for quite some time know what I mean by that. You have to be methodical and you have to be thought-provoking in relationship to understanding your experience base versus what you think you know. So I hope that has a little clarity for you today. And I hope each and every one of you continue to stay the course and have a great day. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.